Hello, everybody. It's Andrea. I wanted to discuss something that it just bugs me. It's a matter of how people, especially leftists, misuse terms, but we also hear this on the right. And what triggered it is that I was listening to something which went back to something Hassan Piker said in an interview with Jacobin, which is obviously a hard left magazine. It wouldn't matter except that Hassan Piker has a huge reach, and he is magnified on the right through Tucker Carlson, who has become an absolute disgrace of a human being. I won't go into that here, but let me read to you the headline from the Jacobin about this interview with Hassan Piker a couple of months ago, actually. Hassan Piker on why the U.S. empire is in decline. We're living in the imperial end times, argues Hassan Piker. With Trump entering a quagmire in Iran after having cast off America's allies, a new era of belligerence, cruelty, and MAGA fascism looms over the home front. What got to me was that term fascism. It's one of my pet peeves because I take language very seriously, and words have certain meanings, and one of the words that's grossly misused is fascism. Fascism started in Italy. It refers to a bundle of sticks. It wasn't Mussolini who adopted this concept, but he was the one who made it famous. What he eventually said was fascism is a form of socialism where everything exists within the state and for the state. So you could have quote unquote private industry. Unlike communism, it didn't demand the complete ownership of private property, the nationalization of all industry, as used to be the case in the former Soviet Union, as in the case in North Korea, as was the case in China. Instead, fascism said that you can have an illusion of private ownership and you can make money as long as you comply with the state, but in fact, the state is ultimately in charge. As I've argued ever since World War II, Europe was fascist because it had nationalized some industries, allowed others to remain private, but through high taxes and basic government control over how the industries were run, it really wasn't a free country. The reason the right wing in America, and again that's a misnomer too, became fascist was because the communists pushed the phrase after World War II, because the Nazis were fascists and the Italians were fascists. Fascist is a pejorative, therefore Republicans are fascists. That's how it came about. The phrase also right wing, left wing, that's really not American. And this is where I want to make a real dive into political systems. If you've read me, you know this, but maybe some of you are new to me. The terms right wing and left wing originated in the French Parliament in the 1780s. After the American Revolution ended, they referred to the fact that the monarchists sat to the speaker's right and the revolutionaries sat to the speaker's left. So you had the left wing and the right wing. But unlike the American Revolution, neither of those wings was liberty-oriented. Both were statist. And this is where I want to talk about it. I have a chart that I've made, and actually ChatGPT helped me make it pretty. So let me put the chart on the screen and discuss what it says with you. My argument is that all forms of government exist along a continuum, and they can be defined either by state power or individual liberty. State power eventually becomes totalitarianism, and that's often very easy to recognize. North Korea is an utterly totalitarian country. If you go to the other side of the continuum, it's less state power, and then you have more individual liberty. We see a lot of examples of more state power. Those examples are China, North Korea, the former Soviet Union. The interesting thing about the more state power regimes is they live under many different names. You can have monarchs. You can go back to Caligula, Henry VIII, Louis XIV, just monarchy. It's where state power is in the monarch. It can be an aristocrat. It can be a theocracy, with Iran's mullahs being a leading example right now. You can have individual dictators, Hitler, Mao, Stalin, Kim Jong-un. You can have all sorts of different regime type names: communism, fascism, socialism, theocracy, juntas, monarchy. They're all totalitarian in nature. They are all institutions where there is maximum government control, minimum individual liberty. Meanwhile, on the other side of the continuum, if you have absolute individual liberty, you essentially get anarchy. Anarchy is no way to live. It usually ends with a strong man taking over, and then you get totalitarianism. So individual liberty always needs to be somewhat tempered by a government framework. And of course, that's what the founders envisioned. They had the Declaration of Independence, which is that we are entitled to individual liberty and that the government exists to serve us, not we to serve the government, but that we need a government for order and to create rules of play under which all can function. So the American constitutional experiment was built on Britain's slowly developing liberty, the Magna Carta, the 1689 Bill of Rights. It was the American Revolution, ironically, that turned Britain away from liberty, because the 1689 Bill of Rights had a lot of the same rights that we take for granted. They discriminated against those who were not Protestant, but they allowed Protestants to have arms. They allowed people to have freedom of speech up to a certain point, freedom of worship. There were a lot of our familiar rights built into the 1689 Bill of Rights and into British culture, even if they weren't expressly in the Bill of Rights. What happened, though, was when colonialists asserted their right to those rights and to full representation and to free political speech, the British said no. And the way they got around this, denying the colonists their rights as British citizens, was to say that the 1689 Bill of Rights bound only the king, who was by now a figurehead and not a real power, and that Parliament could do whatever it wanted. That's how you end up with Great Britain, where citizens have no rights whatsoever. They destroyed their rights to fight against the colonists in the American Revolution, and we took those rights and made them our own. In other words, America is the opposite of fascism. There is no left wing or right wing in America because we don't sit on either sides of the Speaker in the House of Parliament. We do, however, have parties that are more statist, which means less individual liberty, and more individual liberty and less state. Republicans are on the side of individual liberty, maximizing individual liberty within the confines of a government that is minimal but fully existing to provide the conditions for human thriving: the rule of law, national security, and a strong basic infrastructure. We are the antithesis of fascists. If you look at the Democrats and the DSA, who believe in controlling speech, in doing away with the rule of law so that it is completely unreliable, you have to guess. The law applies to those whom the government favors, and it depends on the law. Crimes or whatever the government doesn't like, and it's completely unreliable. Businesses in, businesses out, favored businesses. The government always has a thumb on the scale. So there is no rule of law. There is two-tier justice depending where you sit vis-a-vis the government. If anybody is fascist, it is the Democrat Party. It is the DSA. It is a complete misnomer to call Trump, who has shrunk the government dramatically and is working hard to impose an even-handed one-tier rule of law and to improve national security and to fix the infrastructure. He is the founder's dream. He is individual liberty. He is what this country needs to thrive. We are not the fascists. The fascists are on the other side of the aisle. And every time they call you a fascist, you need to remind yourself that you are neither right-wing nor fascist. They are left-wing because they hark back to the French Revolution, and they are very fascist indeed, including embracing the anti-Semitism that permeates Marxism. Marx hated the Jews, was present in communism, but that Hitler, the fascist, brought to an apex level of Jewish destruction. And on that linguistic note and historical note and my usual cheerful note, thank you so much for spending time and listening to what I had to say.